To the CAIDX webinar series. Today's webinar is about clinical validation of AI diagnostic solutions. And my name is Karen Lindegaard. I come from Danish Life Science Cluster, and Danish Life Science Cluster is partner in the BSR Interreg project CAIDX, where we have focus on clinical AI-based diagnostics. Before we continue, I would like just to tell you a few house rules. I will ask you to mute your microphone and turn off your camera. And if you have any questions, you are most welcome to asking questions. Please place your questions in the chat, and we'll make sure that the presenters will answer your questions. And then I also want to inform you that the webinar is being recorded. And finally, I want to tell you that the slides that you see today and the video of today's webinar will be shared with you after the webinar. And on that note, I would like to welcome two very interesting presenters. We have Kiki van Leuven. She's an AI radiology specialist from Romion Health in the Netherlands, and we have Michael Ploug Boesen. Michael is a professor at the Institute for Clinical Medicine at the University of Copenhagen in a shared position to the capital region. Please welcome Kiki.
Thank you very much. I will then take over from you with the screen sharing. Getting everything organized here. So I'm Kiki van Leuven from the Netherlands, indeed. Previously, I did a PhD in the radiology department in the Radboud University Medical Center on commercial AI solutions in radiology, and really looking at, okay, now this technology is out there, how do we implement it and validate these products? So I was also in the department helping out with these implementations in clinical practice. And I figured during that time that this hospital was not the only hospital struggling with it, making actual impacts with the AI solutions out there. So I started Romion Health together with Stefan Romein, with who we do this as a service for other healthcare organizations as well. So in this presentation, I will touch upon some things I did within my research and also projects that we're doing currently with Romion Health. To start off, I think it's important to describe a bit about what AI diagnostic solutions actually are, because this topic is already mentioned in the title. But when is something really a solution, and when is it not? Because we know that, of course, in research, there is a lot of publications now out there on the medical field and AI. So you've seen in the past years a huge increase in all the papers that are being written on this topic. But even though we have maybe 20,000 publications on this topic, we don't have 20,000 AI solutions in this field. And why is that? Because there's a difference between an AI algorithm and an AI product that you can actually buy and implement. So there's a lot of AI research and a lot of AI algorithms. So neural networks being trained where data comes in and predictions come out. But in the end, to have an AI solution, a lot more needs to be happening. Not only is it more than an algorithm, but it's a real product. It has a software solution, which really should be, when implemented, solve an actual clinical problem. And usually that takes a lot more than just the algorithm. I really like this blog as an illustration. This is one of the AI vendors that managed to really bring an AI solution to markets for detection of lung nodules on CT scans. And they wrote in this blog that for every dollar we spend developing an algorithm, you must spend $100 to deploy and support it. So that already demonstrates the huge difference between just having that algorithm or that publication and really having a medical solution or a medical product that you can use safely. It took them 4 years to develop the product with a team of around 60 people. And from the data that I've collected in my PhD as well, we know that 4 years was indeed around about the average of from company founding to actually first clinical product on the market. So it does indeed take some effort, time, and money to go through all these steps. Luckily, a lot of vendors have managed to do that, so not 20,000 products, but we currently have, for radiology, around 220 AI solutions on the market that you can buy and use clinically. We keep track of that on this platform, healthyeyeregister.com. So we initiated it within my PhD. It was then called aiforradiology.com, and we recently changed names, and now with Romian Health, we maintain this where we list all the products out there that are CE marked, so you can buy them in Europe and clinically use them. We're now also expanding beyond radiology, so soon there will be a page for pathology and nuclear medicine and radiotherapy as well. So we hope to broaden that scope and help bring more transparency in that field, because with so many products, it doesn't get easier in making the right decisions. Just to touch on this very briefly, because as you've seen, there is a lot to buy, and there is more ways to get an AI solution, like with in-house development or co-creation. But as you can imagine, with the market growing so fast, with so many products out there to buy, and also with this investment needed to really bring out that AI solution, I think that the first step should be looking out, is there something I can buy? And only then, if that doesn't work out, look at the other solutions of co-creation or in-house development. Yeah, because you are going to start an immense project if you really want to bring your own medical device AI solutions to clinical practice. But then with all these products out there, radiology is still the majority. Around 75% of what's on the market is for radiology, but I'm sure this problem is going to grow bigger and bigger also for the other disciplines. The question will be how to buy the right product and how to pick one. So what I notice usually what happens is that we go through these 3 steps, kind of overarching steps, to get to some sort of definition of what it would be then the right fit. So I'll just go through them one by one and give you some illustrations of examples. The first one is defining the goal, because it seems with all the hotness and hype around AI, it sometimes becomes the goal itself. It's like, yes, we want AI. But then I think the question should be, okay, but what's the problem you're going to solve with it, right? It is a means to an end. It's not a goal in itself. And this sounds so obvious, I know, but I saw it in our own center as well, that they really wanted this chest X-ray AI solution. So on the X-ray photos, you would then be able to detect the abnormalities. And some of the radiologists were kind of blinded. They saw this presentation with great results on performance, a really high area under the curve. And they were like, we want this. But in the end, we noted it was not necessarily about increasing the quality of the chest X-ray analysis. What they really wanted was something that could make them more efficient at doing them, because it's a high volume, there's lack of staff, like how can we increase the efficiency? But if that's your goal, then a high area under the curve is nice, but the question is whether it's still really going to meet your goal. And in this case, they were really more looking for a workflow solution that would maybe need to also make automated reports and not just show bounding boxes on the picture, because that would actually slow them down. So here you see that, again, the algorithm is a starting point, and of course, good quality of that is important. But in the end, you have to look at the bigger picture to understand, will it really solve your need? What can help there is to kind of map out the whole clinical process. So we're doing that now also for a national project called IFI. I'm one of the project leaders of, where we're going to implement 3 to 6 AI solutions in 5 different centers at the same time. And there, what we start with is really mapping out the whole clinical process and see where does AI then fit in and how does it change the process. And it helps to really get everybody on the same page, verify that you're talking about the same thing, but also that you verify that you expect the same things from the AI solution, and it will help you down the road in setting up also the product requirements. So assessing the feasibility, I think, is a step 2. And then I mostly talk about financial feasibility. I think that's still one of the things that appears to be very difficult. currently with what's on the market, that it's not always as easy to close the business case. Sometimes the positive effects are more downstream. They are, for example, healthcare benefits, and then it's quite difficult to maybe convince the head of the department that it is a good idea to buy this AI solution because they're going to pay the bill, but the benefits are somewhere else. There are some techniques to look at it. Sometimes a business case is already enough. You can make a small calculation if the benefits are internally coming back to you. But if that's not the case, then a health technology assessment might be a better road where you can actually take into account these effects. But this is a bit of a harder exercise to do. So yeah, it's always great if you can a business case is enough, because that will save you a lot of work and time, and probably make it easier as well, because your costs and benefits then are in the same location. So again, an example of where we did that, again, for the chest X-ray, we looked at how much images there were per year, how much time the radiologist takes for a report, and then calculate also the total reading cost. With the idea of, okay, what if we put the AI in there? What is going to happen? So with this AI, the normal chest X-rays could be automatically reported. So a radiologist wouldn't have to spend much time on that anymore to do the reporting for it. But of course, there's only a part of the scans are normal. So that was 35% in our center. And the AI could only, with confidence, reduce about 40% of those images. So not yet the 100%, because it wants to be very certain. And in this way, yeah, it is quite easy to figure out, okay, what is then the potential cost reduction that we can have? In our case, that was only about 7,000 euros. And you can imagine that if you still have to also buy an AI product for that, it might be difficult to close this gap. But again, if that's maybe on a different scale, we might look at a different business case. For example, when you work together with regions or a national level. The last, so this is going to be a very short presentation. I usually take way more time, but we're going to have more time, I guess, in the questions to discuss in more detail. The requirements. So this is a whole list. So we have a whole list that we usually have with more specific questions, but they kind of cover these topics to go through when we are about to get into the process of really choosing one of the AI solutions out there to get to. So I'm just going to touch upon the first two. So the one is the intended use. And I think what's very helpful is to write that up yourself. So the intended use statement is actually a statement that vendors have to write down to say, this is what my product is actually doing. But it can be very helpful as an exercise to do that for yourself first and see, what do I actually want this product to be doing? What indications, what population, what user environment, which users? And then it allows you to be also more critical when assessing the statement of the vendors themselves. So I think this is sometimes it can be very helpful to go through first. Another thing, of course, performance is being looked at a lot. Currently, what you see is that a lot of centers, they say, we need to validate AI locally first because we trust it, and say, hey, the performance is good enough to use it in-house. I really think that depends. It depends on the evidence available. It also depends on the risk. This is a study that we've done where we compared 7 AI solutions for lung nodule detection on chest X-ray with each other in the same benchmark set. And the benchmark set was created by 7 centers. So the idea is that, okay, if we collect some data from different centers, maybe then not each center has to do it individually, but we can say, okay, these products are good enough, and we can take that as the evidence instead of all having to reinvent the wheel. For other types, I think prospective evidence can be very important. So another project that I work on currently is the breast cancer screening program in the Netherlands. So I'm a project leader there to define like how are you going to adopt AI in the breast cancer screening program. And of course, then we're talking about a lot of impact. It's a lot of women where also just a little bit of a higher recall rate has a lot of impact. So I think there is an area where we see a lot of prospective evidence being created to also determine whether we should do this or not, because it has such a high risk and large impacts on those scenarios. So it's not always so easy to say, yes, we need this or that. I think it does depend on the risk and also on the available evidence already out there to say whether you need to go into depth on this. I'm just going to keep it to this for now. I'm very happy to hear your questions relating to this topic, and then I hope we have more time to go in depth.
Thank you, Kiki. There are no questions yet placed in the chat, so I think we'll just pass directly on to Michael. There's one. Ah, yeah, I see that. It's from Frederick Bastrup. He says, Kiki, thanks for a great presentation. Question is often seen that the capital equipment are easier than AI software to get funding for, as example, a new CT or MRI technology or surgical robots, also equipment with less clinical evidence and higher cost. Do you agree? And any guess why that is?
Oh, yeah. I understand your observation. I'm not sure if I really have an answer to that, why that is. I do think what you now see as a strategy to kind of work with it instead of against this is that if you, for example, buy a new MR or CT machine, you try to get an AI contract already embedded. So that's, of course, where also the Siemens and Philips, they have these AI platforms, because then they can co-sell it with their devices. And I think that is a strategy that you sometimes see financially being done, because on this whole, in the bigger scheme of things, if you're spending a few millions, then this AI platform, AI solution is only a fraction of the costs of the whole purchase. So it's kind of easier to push it with it than if you have to request money for just the AI solutions individually. So this is more of a strategy how to make use of this. Yeah, and probably it's just already more embedded in the whole hospital healthcare organization system. Like we already know we need to buy new CTs or MRs in so many years. But for soft, there's a systematic around it. And for the AI solutions, I think that's not there yet. And the business case is often not there yet. So that's not so helpful either.
Okay, there's another couple of questions actually coming in now from Maiken Wolderslund. Have you looked into the cost of overseeing, evaluating of AI in the use after implementation? Yeah,
so I think this is so also in my previous role that we did also try to prospectively monitor AI solutions that we brought to clinical practice. It was super difficult because the data is all over. It's not structured to monitor that easily. And we now see that also the AI platforms, so these are the ones that are becoming the, so because there's so many products out there, we notice there's a lot of overhead to get it implemented. So platforms are being created to, on the back end, connect with multiple AI solutions, and with an hospital organization have only one integration. And I think this is the perfect situation to allow for cheaper evaluation and oversight, because then you have one point of integration, and you see that those platforms are developing more like the post-market surveillance solutions to track, do we see change when something is updated? Are we getting the expected results over time? Do we see differences between machines to kind of also trigger? So I don't know what the exact costs of this are, but it's going to be, if you're taking a platform, I think this is an important requirement to have, probably, that this platform has this functionality, because that will allow you to do it at once with this platform and reduce those manual costs at least.
Thank you. There's a question from Johan Monk-Pagness. He asks, the market is currently being increasingly saturated with various deployers with AI solutions, which are difficult to assess. Do Kiki and Michael have any advice on how to assess whether a deployer is good or not based on their experiences?
Is this maybe a question to move to?
I think it's, yeah, I think we'll keep that for after. Yeah.
That was a perfect bridge to the next one. I hope you can see the screen.
Yeah,
so please confirm that.
exactly.
Cool. Thank you so much for inviting me. My name is Michael Bosen. I'm professor of radiology and a senior consultant at the Department of Radiology at Bispebjerg Frederiksberg Hospital. And then I co-founded back in 2020 with 4 different hospitals in the capital region of Denmark, the Radiological AI Test Center, that I will, let's say, define what we do. And I would like to share the experiences we have had with all of the things that Kiki mentioned for the last 4 years. These are my disclosures, and going to, let's say, the points that also Kiki raised, that we are seeing increasingly AI in the radiological workflow. And we also, if you look at the workflow, let's say the patient has a journey within the Department of Radiology, and currently we have more than 700 AI algorithms approved in the world, where 218 of them was CE marked in radiology, and 530 of them are within radiology in general. 530 and more are within radiology, also taking the FDA approved algorithms in place. What Kiki talked about, and what I would also like to address, because it's become, let's say, very obvious, let's say, it's the decision support or the automatic, let's say, detection of things on the images. It's the image analysis that have become apparent. But we have had for a long time AI within our image reconstruction, in our equipments, and so it's not new for radiology to actually work in this space. And this is another very important point here, is that the radiology and imaging in general in healthcare share the same data format. You cannot scale, or you cannot, let's say, make large scale implementation of AI unless you have the same data. That's a very important point. And this is why radiology owns 80 to 90% of all these algorithms, because we have for 30 years have the same data format. Having said that, then let's say, when AI algorithms are being approved, you see, let's say, very high performance, as Kiki also showed. This is, let's say, the prerequisite for actually approving the technology. But when they are then deployed in different work settings, then a lot of people see different performances, not necessarily bad, but different than the approval. And that it challenges the scalability of these AI arguments. And there are many reasons for that I would like in the next 10 minutes to go through. Some of them are because they are trained on apples and oranges. Then they're tested on, let's say, more or less the apples and oranges. And then they are approved, and then they get the, let's say, very high performances, and then go into a hospital setting where you suddenly have pears, or in other settings, even a fruit basket. So this is the biggest challenge with these products, is not that they don't perform according to what they can, because the product in itself, as you said, it's a software, it's CE marked, it requires a lot to get approved. But the fact is that it works in different settings. And this is challenging. So this is why you need to know what population was it based on, what population will work on now, what is this disease prevalence, because if you have usually is approved on very high prevalence, because otherwise the algorithms is not trained to find what is supposed to find. Then there's the culture within, let's say, the departments. How do you use that knowledge in the workflow? How have you organized yourself? And this sets some challenges to the current way of organizing us. We need to test and validate the things on the local data. We need monitoring, which is, let's say, you also mentioned, Kiki, and then analysis of workflow. So boiling it down, basically what you also said, Kiki, was you have to know the effect of the local intervention before the implementation. What does it cost? How many man hours do you use? What is the intended use of that? Where do you put it into the organization? All of that, because otherwise you cannot make the business case. And that requires much more data analytics and challenges our current IT systems to get that information, because the data is there, but we cannot get easily access to that information. Another, let's say, important point that I would like to mention is that if you look at the left row here with the blues and the reds, this is kind of when the algorithms are approved. Then look at the reds. You kind of expect that this is the performance. But then you go into a settings where the things that you want to find is much less prevalent than what was on the training and test and validation data sets. And then you will see a very high increase in this, especially in what we call specificity. And specificity is transferred into what is the, let's say, false positive rate. And this is, let's say, really challenging. So we usually see more a fall in specificity when we deploy it in a clinical real-world settings, and that generates a lot more false positives. Can we afford that in a healthcare systems that, let's say, do not want to do more examinations? That's the challenge. Another challenge is what you also, Kiki, just published a couple of weeks ago, is that the intended use case is not that straightforward. Because in 2022, there was 122 AI algorithms that had a CE mark. Then you look at it and with your group, and then you discover that of the 6 intended use case definitions, let's say 78 of the 140 AI products, they only complied to 3 or less, meaning that only 29 was the intended patient population, 24 was the intended use environment, and in 13 cases, there was a conflict between what it was supposed to use for and the disclaimer for using it. So the intended use case label, we cannot really trust because everybody do not comply to the same statements. So you really need to dissect into that information in order to understand the products that you want to use and what they are intent, how it should be used in your organization. Because in Denmark, we cannot afford to do what the learning for what they did in UK. They rolled out a lung cancer screening program 1.5 years ago, and then a year after, let's say the National Institute of Health and Care Excellence, NICE, they came with this report in June last year that you cannot use the AI solution for lung cancer nodules dissections on CT scans because there are not enough evidence out there. So they stopped that. And the whole program was based on that you are actually based on using these products. So all of the 16 vendors that was approved for this, they were actually taking the reimbursement away from them last year. 3 months later, they came with the same conclusion on lung X-rays. You cannot use it for the purpose of finding lung cancer. So more research is needed, and then they put in 200 million Danish kroner to actually give learnings to that in the NHS system. So this is what we also have to learn. We also need to understand that AI comes with biases. So if you don't understand the biases, then you learn the people that use the AI, those biases, especially the less experienced, for instance, in mammography screening, or if you artificially introduce a bias, a known bias in the data, then the learning of the users, they will take that bias with them, and even then when you remove the bias, they will still continue with that bias over time. And this is because in medicine we have mentorships, so we learn from higher experiences, and if we trust more in the AI than we do on the human, even your own intuition, then you introduce that bias into the future healthcare, and we should be aware of that. So coming back to the fact that if you have to look at AI algorithms and compare to what medical drugs is, then you have 3 phases of medical drug before it comes to market. This is the same for, let's say, there's a recipe for actually doing that in the CE and FDA approval for the AI algorithms, but there's no demand for the clinical value or where to use it in the intended use label. And what we're missing is the phase 4 real world evidence. And we have, let's say, mechanism in place for the medical drugs, but we don't have it for AI algorithms. So we actually need that. And this is why, let's say, and for that we need the data, and a lot of data. And that is challenged by the laws and the ethics of using data, because are we allowed to do it, and all of that. So data, a project plan is a nightmare to go through, and it's let's say, and we have 218 or algorithms right now in the EU, and they actually have managed to do this. But we as users also need access to the data, and that challenges the law. That is why we had to change the healthcare laws in Denmark, trying to get access to data for prospective, let's say, validation of these AI algorithms. And this is basically why we founded Radiological AI Test Center, to be a center that takes post-market surveillance into clinical context, to make a base for that, to make a solution that could handle this, both get access to the data, to test these algorithms on your own local data before we install them, to make new purchase, let's say, rules, and also change the law for data assessment. And it's a competition-free zone. And we've very fast learned that you don't what we came from was using the algorithms for a specific purpose of interpreting images. But what we really found out that you need to actually, as an organization, let's say, be in control of all of these bubbles. So law and ethics, research, IT infrastructure, implementation, organization, psychology, business models, and all of that, what you also mentioned, Kiki, is a huge challenge to this. And we need to, let's say, based on, let's say, trial and error, basically building the road while we were walking it, to try to get knowledge in this field. And currently we are 17 persons. We have a steering committee here. And a very important fact is that there are 2, let's say, head of departments in this steering committee, because if you have to take AI algorithms into the clinical workflow, you need the backup of your clinical leaders, because otherwise it will be in parallel and it will not succeed. One of our learnings is that we, for instance, for lung X-ray, we took the 2,400 lung X-rays consecutively, also the bad and the skewness and the poor quality data, for one data to another date. And then we had 3 different readers with different expertise going through them, and they say labeling them with 75 different pathologies on the lungs. And then we took an algorithm that was, as Kiki said, that was, let's say, planned to automatically rule out normals, and found out that they could actually, in 1/3 of the cases, find all the normals, similar to what you showed, Kiki. But in our settings, it only corresponded to 7.8 of all images, or 5.8 of all that were emitted. And that was a problem, because then suddenly the business case was not there, because you have to, we do 80,000 images a year. So you have to, let's say, make the algorithms run all 80,000 images to find 4,000 normals. And then suddenly it costs more than $100 per case based on the business model. So it didn't make sense to do that. We published that in Radiology, also with an editorial. We followed that up with some acute findings and tested 4 out of 7 AI algorithms for acute findings on the lung X-ray. So pneumothorax, effusion, lung infiltrate. And we found that the false positive rates for AI was higher than the human beings, whereas the sensitivity, meaning the false negatives, were similar. So basically, can we then use it? Maybe, but not in the setting where you have the expertise. And one of the reasons why we didn't find that many for normals either is because we are lung cancer screening, or lung cancer departments, these 4 hospitals that we tested it on. So you need to know your patient population. We also tested it on, let's say, an outpatient, let's say, device that you usually take to the emergency room and do a lung X-ray on the people who are supine. And then we found out of the 10 different pathologies that was approved to detect, we have to let's say, exclude 5 of them, because it missed 30% of the pneumothoraxes, for instance. And that was because this lung X-ray also, it was taken supine, it was trained on standing. So this is let's say, another important findings. And all the patients also had enlarged heart, meaning that they had heart failure, because they were in supine, the heart is, let's say, enlarged because it's flattened towards the back of the lung cavity. So all of that learning we could do because we had the data set. But if you didn't have it, you were just, let's say, fencing in blind. Then we took another product for osteoarthritis and tested it, and it performs equally good to the expert, which is, let's say, it's a simple technology that let's say, is based to find osteoarthritis on the X-ray. And then we tried to employ it in our own department. And then we, as Kiki said, we did this, let's say, mapping of the patient journey through the department for just a suspicion of having a knee osteoarthritis. And these were all the facts that was the patient that had to go through. This is what was the breadth was within the Department of Radiology. And then after we deployed that, let's say, we could narrow it down to, let's say, a simple X-ray, the AI did the analysis, and then the patient went home the same day or had an MRI the same day. So we saved the patient for 1 visit. And also we actually, let's say, were reducing the number of unnecessary MRIs for knee osteoarthritis by 30%. But we used 10% of 19 different patients per person's time for 1 year to make the reorganization. So is that worthwhile? We are calculating the business case now. Another thing that is important also is that we need to look at how AI looks like. And this is our psychologist that has published this paper. And in order to have drivers towards AI implementations, we need to have either augmented expertise or collective expertise, where the AI introduce something that the humans has difficulties with, or that the humans and vice versa. It's better if the radiologist or the human has expertise that the AI can't do. Then you will have drivers towards implementation. And we need to find those solutions by implementing in different settings in our organization. And we also realized that we needed a foundation to do that. And this is the inspired ones that we, let's say, where you can actually put the data in. You can implement the AI into a secure setting in the platform and taste down the data without getting access to the data. And this is very important to actually both monitor before you buy this, whether it works according to the label, or when you deploy it, and test it for drift over time. And WHO also published that. And another thing that the whole radiology society published that, let's say 2 months ago, as a common statement paper, all of these issues. So these are the things that you need to have in place, because technology is technology, and it always is disruptive and takes time to learn how to use it. But we are ready to do it, and we need to exercise this muscle. Otherwise, we will, let's say, not be able to harvest the benefit of the technology. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Can you stop sharing your presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you for 2 great presentations. I have one question out of these presentations. I wonder, could you at the moment say something about where does it look like it makes most sense to apply AI diagnostic solutions? Are there any area that look particularly promising to you?
Ooh, this is of course the $1 million question, right?
Mm-hmm.
What AI should we buy, or where should we apply it to?
Mm-hmm.
As Mike also mentioned, it can depend on the situation. So even just saying chest X-ray normal detection, as we showed, is not beneficial. I don't think that's the right answer, because when you have a screening setting, it might be very beneficial because you have very different ratios. So the nuanced answer is always, of course, it depends. The less nuanced answer is, of course, we can give you some hints. And I think one where we see now a lot of impact is in the mammography screening. That I think that where you have the advantages is that currently the mammograms in Europe are being read by 2 radiologists. So you already have a way of implementing AI in a way that might be, what you see now is that one radiologist is replaced by AI, but you still have this one other radiologist in the process. And that makes it one that you really gain capacity, because you have you can take away one radiologist, but at the same time, it's not like you replace the whole process by AI, because you have still this one radiologist in place. So I think this is a field where we see the products are really good. There's massive capacity really to be gained, and quality, by the way, what we see now in the first prospective studies as well.
Thanks. And I think I want to go back to the questions that we left behind before. There was a question by Johan Munk-Pagness. He asked, the markets are currently being increasingly saturated with various deployers with AI solutions, which are difficult to assess. Do Kiki and Michael have any advice on how to assess whether a deployer is good or not based on their experience?
Michael, you want to start this one? I can't see you anymore. I'm not sure if you still...
I think he lost.
Okay.
He will be coming back.
Okay, I'll take it. So here, let's scope it down to really the vendor, right? Because you can assess the products, that's one side. But I think the question is here also about which company is good. And I think this is a very good aspect to note to start with, because in the end, the products are being developed by the companies. And I think it's also good to do your validation, let's say, or your due diligence with the companies, especially because of the field we're in, and whether that's radiology or the other fields, it is run by a lot of newcomers in the market. While for CTs and MRs, we have quite a saturated field where we know we have Siemens, GE, Philips, and a few more maybe to choose from. With AI, we have a bunch, also a lot of, oh, sorry, my dog in the background, I'm not sure if you hear. You have a bunch to choose from, and some of these companies have only been around for a couple of years. So it's also good to kind of look into, okay, is this company going to last? And what's their financial position at this point? Because if I buy a product and I'm going to have a contract signed with them for 3 years, it's kind of nice to know if they're still going to be around in 3 years. And of course, that's hard to maybe prove at this point. Like you cannot be certain, but I think you can have a few measures in place to double check that. So checking out what is their financial status, what are their latest investments, and what's their runway with their cash. You can check how are they doing with the MDD and MDR. Have they been able to make the transition to the new law? Because if not, then they might be taken off the market at some point. And of course, what are their customer base? So indeed, are there experiences from other hospitals that are using the product, and how do they like it? I think those are things you can definitely do to also assess more of the company than just merely the products. I can't hear you, Karen. You're muted.
Sorry. Yeah. Do you have anything to add, Michael, to that point?
Yeah, I think that, can you hear me now? Because it was locked off. But the fact is that what we have done here is that we kind of trying to build the base before we build the house, meaning that all of this platform where you host your local data, that you can then install different, let's say, solutions, because you have to remember that all of these solutions, they are not trained necessarily on the same data. They're not tuned the same. And we saw that in our lung, let's say, acute lung X-ray findings in radiology. We saw that for the 4 different pathologies that we're looking for, it was not that one solution actually won all 4. It was actually, there was a champion for all of the different features. So it really comes down to boiling down, what do we want to use the product for? What is your problem that you want to solve? Is it that you have too long waiting lists for interpretation of the image? Then that's one use case. Is it that you want to miss pneumothorax on the lung X-ray because you have incidentally sent people home with that pathology, and then they got more sick or even died from that? So you want to prevent that. Then you actually want to test and use the ones that are best for that. And how can you do that when you have 5 or 6 with different solutions that claims that they can do the same? And we know from Kikki's, let's say, presentations that they are not necessarily the same claims in the intended use labels. So you have to dissect that down as well. And then it also comes down to the cost. So because there's huge difference of the cost of these technologies. Some take €2, €3, others take €1. So you really need to find that out. And this is challenging the way that we have done procurement before. Procurement was more or less based on, let's say, you have some issues that you, let's say, highlighted, and then you chose from, let's say, an algorithm perspective. But here, what I would like to do, and what we do in Radiologic AI Test Center, is that we would like to have a data set that we benchmark all the different use case intended use products, and then select the ones that are best for the hospitals that has that specific challenge.
Thanks. There's another question here from Frederick. No, the first one is actually from Atir Chaudhry. He asks, are there any other examples of AI being used in medtech already on a daily basis? If so, what was the timeline and costing around it?
I can give a bit of context for that for the Netherlands. So, well, I'm going to start with radiology because that's just what we see the most in, but there's also definitely others. So for radiology, we know that around 50% of the Dutch hospitals are now having one or more AI solutions in clinical practice used on a daily basis. So it is really something that's there. It's not just research anymore and just the vendors trying to sell it. It's being sold, it's being used. Timelines and costing. The products cost usually between, it's going to be a wide range, but between 10,000 and 100,000 euros a year in my experience. So it really depends on what you buy and whether you have multiple products and what your volumes are. And that's for the standalone solution. So now you go see more of these platforms. So you buy like a license for the platform and you can plug and play and more with the different products, but you still have to pay for them anyway as well, separately. Getting them into the clinical practice, I think timelines can be very different, but I've seen also sometimes for one single solution, it can take 1.5 years sometimes. If you have to convince your hospital that, for example, to use the cloud. For a lot of hospitals, that has been the first time that they're using clouds now with AI solutions. So these things, getting the buy-in from all the different stakeholders can be very time consuming. And of course, when you have more experience, it will be faster, but I think definitely the first one, it can really take some time. That did certainly touch on other disciplines. I think where you also see a lot happening is intensive care. There's quite some applications also, for example, for predicting when a patient can be moved away from the IC to a normal department. Cardiology, neurology are places where you have a lot of data, also the signal data. So the EKGs are very, well, algorithms are pretty good at analyzing those automatically. And of course, very nice if you have to bring the Holter home and you have like a recording of several days. That's not something you want to review by hand. So there's definitely in other areas as well already some uptake of that. But I think radiology is still at the forefront in that sense.
Thank you. Do you have a quick overview of what is happening in the hospitals in Denmark, Michael?
Yeah, we are, let's say, if you look at AI in general in radiology, all the hospitals has AI in their machines. So AI is used to make images, to make faster processing, to make, let's say, nicer looking images from removing noise and all of that. So in that sense, we've had it for more than a decade. But the fact is, like with ChatGPT, it's become more apparent that AI, it can become part of the solutions, let's say now, because it's decision support. And what we also need to, let's say, a very important message is here that the value, as Kiki mentioned, is not necessarily in the Department of Radiology. It lies in a different setting in the hospital because it's decision support, most of them. So meaning that they make a prediction or highlight something in images. So it takes more time for the radiologist to actually have that learning. But the value might lie at the young doctor in the emergency room and all of that. So it depends where you measure and how you measure it. And you need to actually measure all of these facts in your organization to actually make it a valid product. Another thing is, if you take fracture products, then would we like to pay, let's say, 2 or 3 euros to when you see a bone is broken, like 2 machetes that are broken? That's, everybody can see that. But would you then like the AI behind it to actually, then you pay for something that is very easy for the human to see? That's challenging us today because these algorithms work in the background. They work in batches. It's not just push a button and if I'm in doubt. No, they work behind because it takes some time to process the data. So, and then it makes secondary captures, meaning that comes up with a prediction in the image. So all of that we have not solved yet. So this is why I'm saying, coming back to this, we need to have the foundation to actually validate this and also work with the vendors to when to use it and where to use it and how to use it. Because if we just install it and then pay it in batches, then we overspend money from these solutions, at least in the current way that they are designed.
Okay, I have all of a sudden a lot of questions and we have little time left. So I'll ask you to try to respond as short as you can to some of these questions. We'll just run through them. Frederick Bastard asks, often AI is tested outside intended use, like the chest AI study in this presentation. Should that not be declared more clearly? Question?
Yeah, for me, yeah. Well, the fact is that no, I don't think it's because The AI, yes, as I said, the value often lies outside the intended use because it's installed in the department of radiology. They have the responsibility for the image because it's decision support, but the value lies in a different department. On top of that, for the specific AI study, not to go into details, but the fact is that you need to benchmark it against what you already have. Because if you don't, the human has access to a lot of data from the patient reports, from prior images, and all of these AI solutions today, very few of them can take prior images and compare, which is basically 80% of what we do in radiology. We compare to things that have happened before, where we have information from before and then interpret the new information that are available. Current AI only do it cross-sectionally. So in order to make a clinical value argument, we need to benchmark against what is there already, not against, let's say, artificially designed workflows that many of the publications out there have designed. So this is not the true clinical workflow, but the fact is that this is how at least we interpret it in the Radiologic Society to make that before we begin to install that. So something happens with
Yeah, you got a bit of sparkies behind you. That's great. Hubert, I think that that partly also answered your question. Then we have a question, and I don't know if there is a short answer to that, but you try to think of a short answer. It's from Natalie Erdmann. She says, what is your experience with the current status of economic value evaluations as hospital managers who are the payers rather focus on business value?
Guys, I'm not sure if I totally get the question, but I can for sure comment a bit on the economic value evaluations and what's currently going on. I think if we look at and the value and the cost when they're in the same department, it's easy, you have the business case. When that's not, it becomes more complex. A lot of people look at the reimbursement organizations, like, hey, you have to pitch in. In the United States, some of the products are reimbursed. In Europe, very little to none. I've heard gossip that in Germany, soon there will be an announcement of one of the AI solutions being reimbursed there, so that's quite exciting. And the project I very briefly touched upon, what we're doing in the Netherlands is having one infrastructure for the whole of Netherlands to deploy AI on. And actually the whole building of this infrastructure, both technically, but also more of the collaborative fashion of the governance of AI, that's actually now paid for by the reimbursement organizations. So you do see that they do notice as well, like, okay, this is happening. People are trying things out. It costs a lot of money. We want a grip of that and support that as well. So not necessarily they're reimbursing the separate products yet, but they're reimbursing or supporting at least the infrastructure now.
And just to follow that up, I think that Kiki mentioned, also showed in her slide, that for every $1 you spend of developing the product, you have to spend 100 to actually finding the clinical value. So I think that this is something that our politicians need to take seriously, because the value is not given, because we have organized us very differently, even within the same region. Different hospitals have same patients, but different organizations. It's not the cause of the AI algorithms. The AI algorithms actually work according to the label, so they are locked in their math. So it's how we use that information in our organizations that gives the clinical value. So that's why it's so complicated. It's not just solving the task that the AI has shown to do, because it does on data, but it's actually using that information to create the clinical value. And this is what is challenging us. So I would say that we should learn from what they did in mammography screening in the capital region. They put aside 5 million Danish kroner, that's 800,000 euros, in a 2-year project to implement that and then get the learnings from that. So they got the funding up front. And as we are in a public system, we have a limited budget. Then we need funding up front to actually do something new or do something differently. And if we do that, then we use resources, human resources, IT resources, economic resources that cannot be used in a different place. So it also challenges the way we are financed. So you see the rings and the circles around. We need to take care of those as well. And that is what we are doing in Radiologic AI Test Center, to actually trying to grasp all these rings in the water that AI is disrupting.
Thanks. There's a question from Sandra Hennenin. She says, Kiki, you mentioned that some hospitals have agreed to use clouds for the AI solutions. How common is this? Can each hospital decide on their own, or do, for example, a public funded hospital have to abide by certain legislation? I assume that there could be a problem with sending patient data outside the hospitals.
Yeah. No, very good question. So yes, of course, we have to abide by the law, and not only public funded hospitals, everybody. So that's European legislation. So we have, of course, the GDPR that is part of that. Yes, there's legislation, but that doesn't mean it's not possible. So indeed, it's becoming more and more common. If we look at the AI vendors and how they deploy their AI solutions, we keep track on that on our website as well. So you can look up the product specifications and see how they offer it. And we see a lot of overlap. So a lot of companies still offer their product both on a local installation and a cloud installation, because they know not all hospitals are similarly ready to go for cloud. But we also see it moving more and more to cloud, because it allows way more for scalability in the long run. And also for it's easier to maintain for the AI vendors when they have an update, for example. So I do think that's moving that direction. And also, if we look at our national platform that we're now building, we will also use the cloud. It's just important to realize that there are rules to obey. And for example, the data needs to stay in Europe. So if you're working with a vendor from Korea or from the US, they need to make sure that the algorithm is then hosted on European virtual machines, so that the data does not leave Europe. But again, with the cloud, you have that flexibility. So it does allow for these kind of criteria to meet.
Thanks a lot, Kiki. I think that now I want to wrap up, first of all, by expressing what is in the chat. It's a lot of gratitude to your great presentations. And also from me, thank you very much for great presentations. And then I'd just like to inform everybody that the next webinar will be on the 22nd of April. And the title of that is, where can you find support while developing an AI diagnostic solution? So what are the opportunities there? Thanks a lot, Kiki and Michael, and thank you to everybody, and have a nice day.